All right, we are recording. Welcome to hour one of the Cinder PTG. There is the shared session for the technical committee. The TC is in 45 minutes, so we've got a little bit of time to cover some things. I wanted to start with just a retrospective and just an open forum on thoughts about last cycle, what went well, what didn't go well, how can we maybe do things a little bit better in this cycle. Any ideas, improvements? I don't know. Feel free to weigh in at any point. I'll try to make notes in the Etherpad.
So one thing, we were late. All the releases were on time, technically, but we pretty much missed the release team's deadline for everything by a few days here or there. So I think we're addressing, I mean, the main one was the client libraries, right? We decided to, nobody had done anything, and then we went to merge some stuff and found out the gates were broken, so we had to scramble. So we're addressing that with the periodic weekly jobs. So at least we should get a little bit of a heads up if something goes sideways with those gates. Yeah, anyway, so the bad was that we kind of got the release team ticked off, but the good is that we've got a plan. So yay.
Should we think about like the week before the release week as the release week? I mean, and just freeze everything on the release week. Like, don't do. I mean, we do merges on the last minute, and that's where we encounter these gate failures and everything. I think some teams are pretty strict. They just cut it off early, so that. I mean, just a suggestion. I'm not saying that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah. I don't know. I think I guess for those things, the so it's mainly the early ones are brick and the client libraries. So, and there's been pretty much no action in the client libraries. Brick does get some action, so we're usually more on top of the gates with brick, but we're always behind on merging stuff because there's either last minute things or things that haven't been reviewed or things that people reviewed and then never got back to re-review. So I guess we could try to be better about saying, okay, the deadline's coming up. Maybe do it 2 weeks ahead instead of 1 week ahead. I've been bad about that because I'll notice, oh shit, it's next week is the release. And then, at the Cinder meeting, we say, okay, next week's the release. What's up? And everybody scrambles. Okay, so that would be an improvement to try to plan ahead.
Maybe we could like you're saying, stop it a week or two earlier, but still allow merges. It's just that anything that gets merged had to have been submitted before the cutoff date. That's a week earlier or something. That way. I mean, I guess that could theoretically just move the scramble a week earlier or something, but
that's okay. Yeah, that might be a thing to do. That the patches have to at least have been looked into.
For sure.
Right.
If we're going to be more strict about releases, then we should probably, I would think we would probably want to avoid the accumulation and like massive amount of processing right up to the deadline. Like that, it's that pattern that creates pressure to miss those deadlines. So like if we don't change that and we become very strict about the deadlines, we're just going to end up merging less stuff, making people frustrated.
But I think Anthony's got a good point that if so we'll have to, we'll publish in the release calendar, the Cinder deadline, and it's just your review must have had at least. Well, we'll have to decide what, but it's got to at least have been looked at. So it must have at least have been reviewed. It must have at least have had a clean run on Zool by that date. And then that way, developers will know, I've got to make sure, I don't know what more they can do than they do now. So maybe it's not a good idea. I don't know.
I mean, if it hasn't been reviewed, but it was proposed 6 months ago, then also, I mean, the reviewer's fault, not the author's fault. Yeah.
Right. Well, yes and no. I mean, I guess it's.
They didn't think us too much about it. Yeah.
I guess that the main things I'm hearing is that everybody working the project needs to know what's going on. So we do have the release schedule. So that gives the dates that are officially proposed by the release team. So that's public and everybody should be aware of that. So maybe we need to be a little more explicit in telling. I think the contributor's guide says something about, what happens at the milestones and that you need to be aware of things. But I guess that's something we could review. So maybe that would be. Looking at it. Are you taking notes, John, or?
Yes.
Okay, I think I'm in the wrong YouTube. So I'm pretty much useless. All right, so we need to. All right, so I could take the action item to go look and just make sure that we do say this in the contributor guide, that it's clear what deadlines there are and how to find them. And then and I guess, I mean, to address Anthony's point, I mean, it's maybe the other thing is to make sure it's clear in the contributor documentation that, you've got to, your code must be reviewed in order to merge. And I guess the question now is just like, what do you do to make sure people are reviewing your stuff? So we try not to have people make pains in the ass of themselves, but on the other hand, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Is that the I don't know.
I'm not gonna type that as you spoke it out. I'll find out.
So okay. I guess that, all right. So as far as well, this is another thing we need to discuss is who's going to be handling the release management stuff this cycle. So once again, I'm willing to train people to do this. So I'll do it because I know what I'm doing. But whoever's doing the release management stuff, I guess we want them to be at least 1 week better than I have been in the past couple of cycles in announcing, okay, something's coming up, who's got, I don't know, because it's like, if I ask who's got an important patch. Of course, everybody's got an important patch because whatever you're working on is your most important patch. So that's seems kind of a pointless question. I don't know. Maybe we need somebody to like keep an eye on. I don't know. It's like there's so many freaking patches. I just can't stand looking. But what we need is, it would be good to have somebody to just say, well, I guess this is sort of what we're supposed to be doing at the festival reviews. Is like prioritizing, because what we're doing is continuing, I think, the hey, review me, which is okay, because if you show up, then yeah, you should be able to say, hey, review one of my patches. I think that's a good thing. But on the other hand, maybe we need to be more focused about what's like super important. I don't know. Go ahead, John. Actually, I should just shut up because I don't know why I'm talking.
No, it's helpful. Like I can relate to this. I think this probably touches on maybe some of the other issues that we're having around patches regarding like CI, whether it's reporting at all, whether it's reporting results that we can actually look at, and so on and so forth. It takes a tremendous amount of time to do these one-off special exceptions. It's gotten completely untenable, and it seems to be like, if we're going to insist on deadlines, I think we may also want to consider enforcing the driver requirements, which include working CI and all of the things that are expected to happen. Talking to individuals directly and getting sent like paste bins of CI runs from behind a firewall that no one else can view, and having to go through those separately for each and every special exception is it takes a tremendous amount of time, where time is also an extremely limited quantity. It's not helpful.
I think Brian raised a very important, he raised the question regarding what is important. So I think we can define what is important. At least few things we already know about the security vulnerabilities or the CI fixes or some bug that has been around for a long time or something of that sort. So at least document somewhere, like, because if I'm a vendor and there is something required by my customer, it is obviously important for me. But from a community standpoint, we can define what important means for a patch to get in.
Yeah, I guess the security related stuff haven't been a big issue because we just pull people in, and since it's a security issue, you must work on it. So that's been, but yeah, I guess it would be good to let people know that they need to be aware that that can be happening in the background, because if it's an embargoed security issue, the core team has to work on it. And make sure that it gets fixed, and that can affect the other people's stuff getting reviewed. So it's probably worth mentioning that.
Maybe we could create some sort of review priority list that includes people who have reviewed other patches. Like, say, look, if you review this patch, you'll get bumped up for the core list of reviews. Because if a group's not going to bother doing any reviews whatsoever, why do they get to deserve to be reviewed in a quick manner if they're not willing to help out? So I think one of the things that, like, a non-core doing a review, as long as it's a good review and not something like just a minus or a plus with no text whatsoever, I think it helps the core team to, they get the pre-screen, any like obvious problems might get cut out. And then also the core reviewer can look at the code and say, okay, yeah, I see where they were going. they had a comment here, it looks like it got fixed. So, you know, stuff like that might make sense to have something like that.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think the issue's been, well, for me, speaking for myself, I'm kind of lazy, so it's hard to go through to like come up with such a list. If we could figure out a way to automate it, maybe, or at least we started to try to do that with the new dashboards for the festival of reviews, except it depends on assigning the review priorities to patches. So if we could figure out a way to
I think what we want is the priority thing that we have, but just have it be not removed every time something changes on the patch, so that we don't lose all that metadata.
I'll have to go look. We may have, okay. There's something about the priority field that it used to not be able to make it sticky. I'll have to.
I think that's still the case. I wasn't able to find a way to not have it get removed. And so if a patch is rebased, it's gone. And then it doesn't show up in the list as it did.
Yeah, I'll have to ask Jeremy about that, or maybe Frickler. Because it may be, because I've noticed Garrett just changed again with the interface. So sometimes they change the classification of the entity that tracks that particular thing. And that's why we couldn't do some things with it. So if that's changed again, I guess what I'm trying to say is every so often you have to just check, because stuff changes and they don't tell anybody. So we may be able to make it sticky.
I think only one vote is sticky, right? -2, which.
But I think that's settable in the the Garrett ACLs, although I'm not 100% sure. But I think
we could configure it the same way, like the review priority, configure it like the -2.
Yeah, it's got to be the same type of I don't know, each of these entities has to have certain attributes that you can, peg to, basically. And so the vote, yeah, I'll have to go back and look. So yeah, but if we could, right, so if we could, but it might, I don't know, it might be worth having, back up. It would be good if we had like a pre-festival, and this is like the last thing you want to do is have another meeting, but if we could have like a quick pre-festival meeting to just say, all right, here's the priorities for this week. And then if they were sticky, right, that would be good. But even if we just slapped them in the Etherpad and said, these are the ones we're going to do this week.
So I guess like a screening, and then we stage a subset of commits for focused review.
Yeah, we would just have to. So what we'll have to think about is, I guess we're thinking right now, is like what the reasonable bandwidth is. Like, so how many reviews do we expect to be able to hit? Because we make an enormous list and get through like 8 of them, and there's 22. That's going to just piss people off. But if we know, all right, we're going to aim to get 8 through, we pick which 8. I think what we want to do is leave room so that each of the reviewers who shows up can nominate a patch of their own. So if we figure there's like 8 people show up, then that's 8 more reviews. And then the review festival is right, like it's a 2-hour thing, right? I don't know. So it's work, but it's, I guess if we could focus it and just say, okay, 5 of us meet, or the cores meet, or even just, I don't know, I hate to stick it out with one person because I will volunteer. I do not want to do it. So I'm like not volunteering. I should have said the word. I am anti-volunteering, but I'm willing to participate in trying to help make it happen.
So what is the model then that you're proposing more specifically? Like each participant in this screening meeting come with a single patch for proposal and we create a collection?
No, I think what we got to do, so the screening meeting would be, right, so the core team or people who are interested in driving, I don't know, we can decide exactly who, but it's going to be the team who's got to look and say, look, here we are, we know what phase we're at in the cycle of the patches that have been proposed, what are important to make sure we get reviewed right now. And then we would just pick those, and then there's, right, if we by chance happen to get through all of those in the review session, then there's always stuff to review, but at least we would know these particular ones are getting focused on right now.
And this solves the problem of just having it be untenable, like the patch set for the normal festival reviews without the screening process is too vast to really make.
Yeah, and it's just like, so I usually look at, I don't know, I tend to pick like the oldest ones that have been sitting forever and try to get those moving again. And maybe that's a good, I don't know. So this is just an idea. Maybe it's better for all of us to just show up and just review whatever we think makes sense.
Isn't that what we're doing now?
Yeah, and I guess that's not working. So, so we could, well, yeah.
So what do we do, Brian?
I don't know. This was Anthony's idea.
Brian volunteered to do something.
Right. Well, I guess here's the way to look at it. Okay, if we want to prioritize things and make sure stuff's moving along, then we're going to have to do that, which is not currently happening. So we just decide what process we want to use to make high priority reviews known and move along. I think this, yeah.
You Etherpad, why don't we just have people dump what things they've reviewed into that along with their patch request? And you could just go click in and say, oh yeah, this guy made a good review. We'll prioritize this. And
yeah, that has worked to some extent. It would be better if there were a way to like the review priority flag and have that sort. Like have something that's programmatic, because the Etherpad just becomes a dumping ground, and then to determine the thing that's actionable requires you to go through the entire thing. I find it very time consuming because so many people want so many reviews. It's
does the Etherpad does Garrett have like an API or something? It's just like a matter of someone writing code, or is it deeper than that?
No, Garrett has an API, so we could take advantage of that if we could figure out exactly what we want. And if we, given the capabilities of Garrett, but it does have an API, so you can make, requests from the API, get lists of stuff that way.
Yeah.
But if we again create that tier list of importance and categorize this into particular buckets, the reviews, like we could always review the first one that are more important, and then like in the order of like being less and less important. I mean, again, I'm speaking from community perspective, not individual.
Right. All right, I'll volunteer to talk to Jeremy and try to find out what facilities there are in Garrett to make the review priorities sticky, or something like that we can use, so that if we have a meeting and we make a list of, okay, these are the things that are important for this next week, it'll stay.
I mean, at the least, I would think if you can programmatically add that priority, maybe you could just have similar to the CI where it just listens, and anytime it said, you know, a new patch that comes in, it knows that it had priority previously. It just goes back and programmatically adds it back. If there's no way to make it sticky anyway.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Or it would also be nice to maybe somehow, like for patches that are passing, passing Zool and just aren't getting any reviews, somehow bumping those so they don't just float off to sea. This does happen, unfortunately.
Well, part of that, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that should happen, but part of that's because people aren't really engaging in the community, right?
Yeah, but there be some level of fixes that come in that just kind of work that way.
Yeah, fair.
We try to make sure in some of the like review festival meetings to just look for old stuff. And I mean, there's a bug fix out there right now. There's actually 2 copies of the same bug fix out there right now that fixed a Python 2, Python 3 bug in a backup driver in 2020. And they still haven't merged either one of them. And I don't know.
The MD5 encode for the Google stuff?
Yeah.
I thought I plus 2'd that. Maybe not. I definitely have it somewhere here.
Yeah, you plus 2'd it.
Okay.
We have to look for stuff like that because people submit it and they apply it to their own cloud, and then they don't really care what we do with it.
Yeah, there are some folks that will just drive by and they expect that our process is functioning and well resourced and healthy. It's just, they couldn't be more wrong about it. But you know, I mean, it's a reasonable assumption. I'm kidding, not entirely, but. So is it fair to say that given the time to bring up issues, that finding more efficient ways to use the resources we have to do reviews is by far the top priority? I'm not hearing review quality. I'm not hearing bug triages. Not that that's not important, but just making the most out of the resources that we have for reviews and making sure patches don't fall through the cracks and we end up with 90 patches to review and 2.5 days to do it before the release deadline. Seems to be maybe the biggest pain point that needs addressing. Is that a fair statement? Are there other things? Like if we just fixed one thing and that was the thing we improved on, would that feel good? Or
The different but related one, just as a classic issue, the random failure rate of our CI jobs has crept up a bit over the last year or two, and I think it's going to take some concerted effort of diving into it and figuring out what to do about it, because it's high enough now that as somebody who's been submitting a bunch of patches for like eventlet removal, you hit enough random failures that it's like kind of a problem where you have to recheck a patch like 3 times before you can even get it to pass the gate.
So from vendor perspective, I see the exact same thing, especially towards the end of the cycle. When everyone starts submitting patches, you get constant failures.
Yeah, and it's all different failures is the problem. It's not like one bug. It's some kind of general instability.
it's usually like timeouts, like SSH timeouts. So you get timeouts in like HTTP timeouts, things like that. I've noticed.
Yeah. And I
Yeah, Brian, I remember having issues like coming up to the deadline and trying to get patches in, but CI was failing. We had to keep doing rechecks, and like I think that it wasn't just that, but like
well, the problem is like the failure rate of any given Tempest job or unit test job is like a couple of %. But when you have to pass like 12 of them, like one of them fails every time you touch something. So it's just statistically doesn't really work in your favor.
Like to me, that's like a resource problem. Shouldn't we just like allow, like have like a gosh, I can't even think of a term. Shouldn't we have like only a certain number of CIs running at a given time, and then certain patches just have to wait until their turn, basically? Because I mean, the problem to me is, given that I noticed timeouts and stuff, it's a resource problem.
I think the problem is some of those timeout errors are hiding actual bugs, but it's really hard to figure out what component the bug is even in, because it's often not necessarily Cinder, and then track it down to any useful fix. I don't think we really even have a good view of data that really even kind of hints at, you know, problematic spots or anything right now. There's a couple of weird things going on in unit tests, because I'm still seeing failures there every now and then, even though I know Brian just fixed one of them.
I know, but it's a constant. I think we all need to be aware, because we need to encourage people to file bugs. Because the unit tests should be stable, and they're not.
Well, and that's the tricky thing with the unit test is, like, every time I try to reproduce these failures on my machine, I can't do it.
Nova has a bunch of, I mean, they have a similar size of unit tests and functional tests. Does anyone have a sense? Are they seeing these same issues, or is this just specific to the Cinder project?
I don't know, but I think they've done a bit more work on the architecture of their unit tests over the years than we have. I mean, they have, because I looked into some of this with the eventlet removal stuff, they have code in there where, like, they can tell if certain unit tests use the database or not. You know, we initialize the database for every single unit test that we use. There's stuff like that that's optimizations that, you know, could maybe lead to stability, depending on what the problem actually is.
So you're saying they're just doing less, and they're therefore decreasing the probability of failure?
Well, we also need to get more creative on improving the tooling with our unit tests, so that when they break, you can actually figure out what happened. Because that's the problem a lot of the time, is they fail, but you can't really tell why they failed or what they were doing or what actually caused a problem.
So I don't have like a specific example, but I have seen LVM driver fail often, like either not able to create the volume. So this is the one I have seen more than a few times, even in my domestic deployment, like apart from CI. So yeah.
I think one of the common issues with most of the unit tests is like they don't reproduce at a lower concurrency, but given a higher concurrency, they tend to show up, and it is just like not proper cleanup of some things that go into other tests and create unexpected behaviors. Like sometimes we see assert this value to this value, and like one value is 2, other value is hugely random, like 900 something.
Well, and it's good when they actually fail, because you can track that. But I mean, I saw some this week and last week where, like, the coverage unit test job was just timing out, and the timeout ones I want to do some more looking into, because when that happens, you often don't get a report that really can even tell you which one was still running and what it was doing. And I mean, if I can get ones that fail with an actual message, that's usually enough to at least investigate it. But a lot of them kind of just break in unclear ways.
So is it a problem with the tooling itself, or is it like just some pretty output that we are not doing? Like for that commands, the set of commands that we run to execute the test, and like need to output it into a better way.
Some of the failures happen because you end up with a one unit test that just spins off somewhere and it never actually finishes running. And I had prototyped up some code a year or two ago so that when that happens, we detect it and it tries to attach a debugger to it and gives you a backtrace of like what it was actually doing. But I didn't ever submit it. It's only going to give you useful info if you have the Python debug info installed. And I think figuring out how to bootstrap that into the Tox environment and everything on a CI node is a whole thing that I didn't get around to exploring.
Yeah, one other thing I've noticed, like if we had some tooling to detect like some, like you mentioned, like one unit test running forever, like if there is a time dot sleep somewhere, we make sure to mock it. If there is a lock somewhere, we make sure that it's not blocking other tests, like something of that sort tooling that would detect these kind of common patterns which cause these timeouts.
I've wanted for a while to just go maybe put together a global poison mock on like time.sleep in our unit tests, because every cycle somebody does work in a driver and introduces a unit test that sleeps for 10 seconds when it shouldn't. And it's just, no one notices. And then you have to go patch it up. And
Well, we could, so we've got something in the base unit test class that I think mocks, it's either sleep for eventlet or something for eventlet.
yeah, there's ways to do it where you can make it where it'll just blow up if you touch certain things.
So maybe we could do that for time.sleep.
I think the reason that we have tests that run endlessly is a little more complicated than that most of the time, but that's one of the low-hanging fruit ones.
Yeah, I mean, just a list of all these common patterns that we could mock out entirely from our unit test, or like a certain number of tests, like all the database tests should not have this, like some reader writer lock being triggered.
That type of stuff just screams race conditions to me, pretty much always. Tests that don't end. You got two locks work invertedly, and
people frequently write unit tests that interfere with each other. And
yeah.
Like
that too.
A lot of people have done that too.
Yeah, that's the other problem, is the problem in the unit test or is the problem in the code?
So how can we narrow in on something that's actionable that we can track over this cycle?
I don't know. We're talking a lot about unit tests. I think I'm more worried about the Tempest side personally, but
I would agree with Eric.
Well, I mean, the reason I'm bringing up the unit tests is I'm seeing, right, if one of those fails on a job, then even if all the other Tempest stuff succeeds, you're still hosed because you're gonna have to do a recheck. And they should never fail, right? They should be like rock solid. So I think what I've been noticing is, like, particularly with the backup drivers, there seem to be things that aren't mocked. So, but I guess what I want to say is this: it's hard to have a project to go through and just fix everything, unless we had a dedicated person. But I think we want to encourage people, if you see one of these things break, don't just recheck, file a bug or something, because even if we just fix them one by one, eventually we'll get them all.
There's also I mean, one of the things with that is it might be helpful to try to document when unit tests fail. If they fail the way they're supposed to fail, you can get a subunit file from the job and you can use it locally to run the same tests in the same order and that kind of stuff. One of the other problems that I've seen, well, I guess that's in the I think it's maybe in the NFS Tempest jobs. There's something that happens where it fails every now and then, and the logs just don't even get collected. And I feel like last year I had sniffed down some trail pretty far as to why that was happening, but I never got to where we actually fixed anything. Because I think there's something going on in some of the infrastructure where you run Tempest and it fails, but then something breaks in the process of log collection. And that might be one that's worth actually trying to just go investigate and fix, because it makes it pretty hard to do anything useful with it.
So on the unit test point again, like we talk about isolation, like they should run it in isolation and should not affect other tests, but I don't think right now we have a structure for that. Like at least for this config overrides, we have a method called override config, but it's not like documented somewhere that there should be a standard for it. And similarly for other things that we do inside a unit test to like achieve complete isolation, these are the standards we should follow, like something of that sort should avoid. Again, I'm coming back to unit test. But yeah, Tempest is also interesting. I think at some point we had this OM killer where it was like, I think there were like at some point being multiple VMs, more than 10 VMs being created and not cleaned up properly. And this OM killer was doing some sort of things. And we increased, I think, the swap space in the CI jobs to make the situation better. But yeah, I think we do have a problem of proper cleanup as well. Like I've seen in Tempest runs in local dev stack setups where a bunch of resources just get never cleaned up, and it's like more than 10 for like a particular thing, like volume types. There are more than 10 volume types sometimes that still exist.
So that some of that might be actual bugs in the tests, right?
Yeah, probably.
I think there's also a whole mess where sometimes if tests fail, they attempt to clean things up and it doesn't always go too well either. But I guess you're talking about even in the normal path.
Yeah, I mean, if I do 10 Tempest run and there's some common denominator of resources that stays every time, like it surely is a bug in the test. I mean, at least for the resource intensive, like the things we create, like VMs, volumes that are resource intensive, at least those should be cleaned up properly. I mean, I don't worry much about volume types or like just these are database entries, but that are actually consuming the hardware. That seems to affect us more.
I guess to Brian's point about trying to file bugs too, I need to think about that some. I rechecked a patch this morning because it failed one of our functional jobs and it had a big error, and I looked at it and was like, I don't have time to even care what this is really. I don't see a lot of failures from those functional ones, but I think that one I saw this morning is the first one I've seen in a while.
Do we have the ability to gather stats on maybe which one fails the most frequently that's non-deterministic, and maybe focus efforts on, like, at least have a target specific, like, I don't know, I'm trying to narrow in on something. What will happen is what has happened, which is this is a problem and it continues to be a topic in every retrospective, but like, how can we narrow in on this and try to move this ball forward?
I don't really know, other than anytime we hit a gate failure, someone goes and dives into it and investigates it, and because they're all over the place. Like I'm not seeing a whole lot of repeated looking ones lately.
Do we have a tool that allows us to say, like, over a particular time period, how many times did this job fail? Or
Yeah,
How
you
many
can see it at the
jobs?
job level. I don't think we have a good way to do it for like per test or anything though.
I really want a histogram of all of the tests across an entire cycle.
Because
Forever.
the history will show it to you for a job.
We had Elastic Recheck at some point, right? But I think it retired. Or
Yeah, and we don't really have anything that does the same thing now.
Can we unretire it? Is that like, can we just vote to bring that back? Is that it's probably ridiculous, but I have to ask.
I don't know.
Why can't we have that? I don't understand. It seems useful. I remember using it and getting value out of it.
Wasn't it just because it cost too much to run or something? I don't know.
Maybe I think it got replaced by something. But I'm not sure.
then we are clearly not using the replacement.
I don't know. I mean,
I thought Elasticsearch was open source. Like you're saying cost too much in terms of like hardware resources. We run our own instance. Like, can we just allocate some Red Hat resources and run our own and just scrape all of the? I don't know. Unless there's some sort of.
well, I mean, it's one of the theories of 2026 now, right? Is that we should be figuring out how to put together some LLM agent that will parse this stuff and figure it out. That's probably something that would be worth digging into if someone really wants to do it, but it's a lot to take on.
So I Googled OpenStack Elastic Recheck, and you get, so there's a presentation about how you can use it and how it works, but it also refers to Searchlight, which I know got retired like 4 years ago. So
We got 3 minutes before the TC session starts. So what do we do? Like, how do we wrap this up? Like, what can we do to make progress? We can definitely be a little more organized and do like a pre-screening for our festival reviews. I think in retrospective on that, I think doing them every 2 weeks instead of once a month, I think is helpful. I think being able to round on that more frequently feels like I'm a little more connected to all of that, and I'm not like spinning up from what feels like scratch every single time I do it. So I think that was good. We can definitely pre-screen and make that more efficient. Is there something that we can track or try to make progress on with regard to CI? What do we want to try to do in terms of like making this release a little more efficient than the last one? Besides what I just mentioned, is there anything that we want to try?
At least immediate create the bug. Start.
Say that again. I missed it.
Yeah, I said like so I heard like we don't create the bugs right now. So last bug even is like 229 days old. So the first thing we could do, we must create the bug. Even it's a even we are rejecting. I think that should be a start. Minimal.
You mean like filing bugs against Garrett when CI is failing, or?
Yes.
Okay.
So John, one thing I wanted to mention before I don't know, we'll be jumping to the TC session, but for the Tuesday to Friday, you have mentioned like the timings as 1300 to 1600 or 1300 to 1700, but the session starts at 1400. So I noticed that discrepancy in the.
Do you have a line number?
29, 36, 44. 29 is the starting So if you see, it says 1300 to 1600, but the timing starts from 1400 to 1700.
Yes, you're
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Same for other days as well. And one more thing I wanted to ask, like I saw the TC session, the Monday agenda, and I mean, I didn't see anything that would require the whole team to be there. So is there anything specific that we needed to join, or is it just like an optional thing?
I think it's an optional thing. I was talking to the Nova folks, and that like they were planning on just being present and part of the TC shared sessions, but I haven't looked at the exact agenda since last week, so I don't have anything that's on my mind. I do think they're going to talk about LLM configuration in repos and stuff like that. I don't know when exactly that's going to be.
I think those AI sessions are on Friday. So this one is for Monday, and I don't see anything that is AI related, or but I do see ventilate, so it might be interesting.
Yeah, there's definitely some things in there, and just in general, I mean, I guess that's the project collective in terms of like having everyone together in one space as much as possible. So I'd be curious just to hear like what their summary is about the release and things like that. Event layer removal is interesting. I don't know. I don't have anything specific. What are you? Are you wanting to do something instead, or just trying to get a sense of what they're focusing on?
I was planning to not join that if not needed.
I think you should feel free to skip. I mean, it looks like there's going to be some discussion of community goals at 1600 and some discussion about the security SIG, but I think Cinder's well integrated into that. The problem's been other teams that, don't pay attention. And then the second part at 1700 is operators, who may or may not show up. So I think you should feel free to, I can't go on Friday. So if you say you'll go on Friday, I will cover for you today. How's that?
Yeah, that's for me.
Okay, deal. All right, we got to drop because I think it's 16:02 right now.
Yeah, we need to stop the recording. But yeah.
Oh, right. Good point.
Because I have had recordings where